Welcome to our study called The Call of God. And we're looking at Genesis chapter 12. So today we're going to talk about how God introduces the covenant to Abram. Notice that verse 1 starts, "The Lord said." Now some translations, including the ESV, and the note in the ESV, have had said. So it's a past tense. Both make sense linguistically here. Why the note? Because the translators are trying to clue us in on the fact that the call of God to leave his family and land came to Abram before he left Ur. Can we be sure of this? Well, do you trust the martyr Stephen? Stephen says in Acts 7 that God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran. Remember that as Moses writes this, he is not giving a play-by-play account of history, which is obvious to us because there's so much we're not told about. The life of Abraham that is told to us is not comprehensive, but gives us a snapshots. It's giving us little chunks of history here and there. And each little snapshot that is given to us for a reason. There's a main reason why each little story of Abram is in here. So Moses is teaching the origin of the people of Israel. Now that we know why did God say, what did God say? What did God say to Abram? Well, God gives some commands and promises to Abram. Here's the commands. The first imperative is easy to pick out. God says, go. Abram is to go out from his homeland, from his country, and the people he knows, and his own family. From the beginning of Genesis, we have seen the separation of God's people and everyone else. We saw the separation between Cain and his family and Seth's family. We saw that split there. We saw the separation between Noah and the rest of the world. Here we have God calling Abram to separate himself. But does that mean that Abram is supposed to find some secluded place and become a hermit? Is Abram not supposed to interact with the other people around him? This leads us to the second imperative. Because of the way it's worded in English, it's easy to miss. The very last phrase of verse 2 is a command. Abram is commanded to be a blessing. Abram is to go out from his people, from his family and his country, to separate himself so that he might bless the nations. We find this idea again in the New Testament. Jesus calls his disciples salt and a city on the hill. They're distinct and separate, but yet a blessing to all that surrounds them. Just like in Jesus' prayer in John 17, Christians are in the world to be a blessing in the world, to show that the Father loves his people, but they're not to be of the world. They're to be separate from the world. That takes us to the promises. There are several different promises here that are given to God, or given by God to Abram. The first promise is that God will make Abram a great nation. But how could this be? Moses already told us that Sarai was barren. He made it very clear she had no child. Of course, we know that's what barren means, right? He's using redundancy here. Redundancy is purposeful, not poor grammar. It is ironic at this point that Abram's name really means exalted father. And Abram's name means exalted father. He's not a father. How could he be? His name is ironic. So that should clue us in too. Like something's going to happen here. Something's going to happen. God's going to do something. So the second promise is that God will bless Abram. How Abram is to be blessed is not revealed to him all at once, but in stages over decades. He has been singled out for God's grace and mercy. It's been clear. But how is that going to play out in his life? He's going to have to wait and see. The third promise is that God will make his name great. Though separated by many years from the Tower of Babel, the proximity of this story to that of Babel in Moses' account shows us the conflict between man's sinful desire and God's plan. The people at the tower wanted to make their own name, right? They didn't want to do their own thing. They wanted to make themselves something, not wait for God to do it. So here we find God promising to make Abram's name. The next promise is that those that bless Abram will be blessed, and those that curse, they will be cursed. This idea is repeated to God's people repeatedly throughout the scriptures. If God is for us, who can be against us, right? Those that come against God's chosen will find that God himself will fight against them. So if Abram blesses people, they will be blessed. If people curse him, they'll be cursed. If people bless Abram, they'll be blessed. So the way they treat the man of God will be how they will be treated by God. Very interesting. Well, the fifth promise is that Abram and all the families of the earth, by Abram, all the families of earth will be blessed. Abram will be blessed, and everyone, all the nations, all the families of the earth will be blessed because of him. Here we find some more unveiling of the mystery of salvation here. The promised seed of the woman is now promised to come from Abram's family. Again, God is showing the nation of Israel that they are not to be inward focused, but are to be a blessing to all nations. It's not just about them, it's about everyone else. That's why he's doing what he's doing. That's why they've been chosen, to be a blessing to everyone. Now we see the final promise in verses 1 and 7, where God promises a new land to live in. Abram was commanded to leave his land behind for a better land, a land of promise. And so those are all the promises, those are all the commands that God has given to Abram. That's the call that he received when he was still hanging out in Ur, and God sent him forth, not knowing where he was going, but knowing that he was following God.